The sound was not an explosion, but a groan. It was the deep, mournful protest of steel and concrete giving up the ghost. At 3:17 inches the morning, the tenement building on the south side of Chicago didn't just shake, it surrendered. I woke to the taste of pulverized drywall and the terrifying sensation of the floor tilting 15 degrees beneath my bed. At 68 years old, my reflexes were supposed to be slow, but terror is a powerful accelerant. I scrambled out from under the covers just as the ceiling plaster rained down, shattering my bedside lamp. The fire alarm didn't blare, it wheezed, a dying electronic gasp that was somehow more frightening than a scream. "Move, Elena, move." I grabbed my purse and the framed photograph of my daughter, Clara, from the dresser. It was the only thing I saved. Not my jewelry, not my warm coat, not the cash hidden in the coffee tin. Just the picture of Clara at age 7, missing her front teeth, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in 20 years. I made it to the street with seconds to spare. The collapse was a slow-motion tragedy. The east wing of the building sheared off, sliding into the sinkhole that had been swallowing the foundation for months. Dust billowed out like a nuclear winter, coating the freezing February air in gray choking powder. I stood on the cracked asphalt in my thin pajamas and one slipper, shivering so violently my teeth clicked together. The flashing red and blue lights of the emergency vehicles painted the snow in grotesque colors. An officer draped a foil blanket over my shoulders, but it did nothing to stop the cold that was seeping into my marrow. Condemned. The word floated around the chaos like a verdict. 35 years. That apartment had been my sanctuary, my prison, and my history. And now, it was just debris. I was 68, retired, with arthritis in my knees and a bank account that hovered constantly near zero. I had nothing. I walked to a nearby 24-hour diner that had opened its doors to the victims. My hands trembled as I fed coins into the payphone, my cell phone having been lost in the rubble. I dialed the number I knew by heart. It rang 4 times, then 5. Finally, a groggy, irritated voice answered. "Hello? Who is this?" "Clara, it's Mom." There was a pause, heavy with annoyance rather than concern. "Mom? It's 4 in the morning. Do you have any idea what time it is?" I explained. I tried to keep the hysteria out of my voice, but the shock was setting in. I told her about the collapse, the dust, the fact that I was standing in a diner with one slipper. I told her I had nowhere to go. "I just need a place for a few days, Clara. Just until the city shelter sorts something out. Please. It's freezing." Silence stretched across the line, a vast, Arctic distance. Then I heard Greg, my son-in-law. His voice was muffled but audible. "Tell her no. We have the dinner party this weekend. She'll ruin the vibe. She's always dramatic." Clara sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. "Mom, look. This is really bad timing. Greg is under a lot of pressure at the firm, and the twins have soccer and ballet. We don't have the space right now." I gripped the phone receiver until my knuckles turned white. "Clara, I'm homeless. I'm not asking for a vacation. I'm asking for a roof." There was a whispered argument on the other end. Then Clara came back, her voice harder, fortified by her husband's selfishness. "There's a shelter on 5th and Main. They take 2 people in your situation. We really can't disrupt the household right now, Mom. You know how Greg gets. I'm sorry." She hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a monotonous drone that sounded like the end of the world. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The shock had frozen my tear ducts. I walked out of the diner, ignoring the protests of the waitress, and walked 4 blocks to where my 2008 Honda Civic was parked. Miraculously, it had been far enough away from the collapse zone to survive. I climbed into the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a reluctant cough. The heater worked, but only on the highest setting, blasting air that smelled of burnt dust. I locked the doors. I reclined the seat. And there, in the cramped, freezing interior of my old car, I finally let myself break. I cried for the apartment. I cried for the cold. But mostly, I cried for the realization that had been creeping up on me for years, confirmed now in the harshest way possible. I had raised a daughter who did not love me, and I knew why. For 30 years, I had been a ghost in Clara's life. I was the mother who was never at the school plays, never at the parent-teacher conferences, never there to tuck her in. I was always working. I was always with Julian. Julian Thorne, the son of the billionaire biotech magnate, Evelyn Thorne. I started working for the Thornes when Julian was 3 days old. Evelyn was a visionary, a genius, and a woman completely devoid of maternal instinct. She viewed her son as a biological obligation she had fulfilled, handing him off to me so she could return to her labs and her boardrooms. I became Julian's world. I was the one who held him through the night terrors. I was the one who taught him to tie his shoes. I was the one who sat by his bedside in the hospital for 3 weeks when he had meningitis, holding his small, feverish hand while his mother was at a conference in Geneva. Clara, 5 years younger than Julian, grew up with babysitters and empty afternoons. She grew up knowing that her mother was off mothering someone else. "You love that rich boy more than me," she had screamed at me when she was 16. I didn't. I loved Clara with a fierce, desperate ache. But love doesn't pay the rent. Love doesn't buy groceries. Clara's father had vanished before she was born. I was an immigrant with a high school education. The Thorne job paid 4 times what I could make anywhere else. It was the only way to give Clara a safe neighborhood, braces for her teeth, and a college fund. I sold my time with my daughter to buy her a future, and in the transaction, I lost her heart. Now, decades later, the bill had come due. I spent 3 days living in the Honda. I parked in Walmart parking lots, moving every few hours to avoid security guards. I washed myself in gas station bathrooms with cold water and paper towels that felt like sandpaper. I ate crackers and peanut butter. My back seized up in agonizing spasms. My legs swelled. I felt my dignity peeling away, layer by layer. On the 4th morning, while charging my phone, which I had recovered from the glove box at a coffee shop, I saw the notification. It was an Instagram post from Clara. It was a picture of her perfectly manicured backyard, her twins playing on a swing set. The caption read, "So grateful for a peaceful home and a drama-free life. It's important to set boundaries with toxic family members who only bring chaos. My priority is protecting my peace. Number self-care, number boundaries, number toxic moms." The comments were a chorus of validation from her friends. "So brave, Clara. You have to put yourself first. Toxic parents are the worst." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. She had spun my tragedy into her narrative of victimization. She had labeled her homeless mother toxic to justify her cruelty. That was the moment the sorrow turned into something harder, something like steel. I closed the app. I went to my contacts. I scrolled past the friends who had offered empty condolences but no spare rooms. I scrolled to the bottom, to a number I hadn't dialed in 12 years. Julian Thorne. I had saved it when I retired, the day Julian turned 18 and left for Stanford. He had hugged me, a tall, brilliant, socially awkward young man, and pressed a card into my hand. "If you ever need anything, Elena, anything, you are the only real parent I ever had." I hadn't called because of pride. I hadn't called because I was the servant and he was the master. But pride is a luxury for those with warm beds. I pressed call. The phone rang once. "This is Julian Thorne." The voice was deeper, commanding, echoing with the authority of a man who ran a Fortune 500 company. But the cadence was the same. "Julian," I croaked. My voice was ruined from days of not speaking and crying in the cold. "It's Elena." There was a silence on the line, a sharp intake of breath. "Elena?" The corporate veneer vanished instantly. "Elena Vance? My Elena?" "Yes," I whispered. "It's me." "My God," he breathed. "I've been trying to find you for years. I hired investigators, but you changed your name after the divorce. And, Elena, why are you crying? What's wrong?" I tried to be strong, but his kindness broke the dam. I told him about the building, about the cold, about the car. I didn't mention Clara. I couldn't bear to say it out loud yet. "Stop," Julian commanded. His voice was shaking with a controlled fury. "Where are you? Exactly. Send me your location now." I'm at a Starbucks on 43rd and... Stay there. Do not move. I am coming. Give me 30 minutes. Julian, you don't have to. Elena, you raised me. You saved my life 1,000 times. Do not move. He hung up. I sat there, clutching the cold coffee cup, wondering if I had made a mistake. Julian was a billionaire now. He was on the cover of Forbes. He was a titan of the biotech industry. What if he saw me filthy, smelling of stale car air and poverty, and felt only disgust? 28 minutes later, the cafe grew quiet. Outside, a cavalcade of 3 matte black SUVs pulled up to the curb, blocking traffic. People in the cafe craned their necks. A large man in a suit exited the lead vehicle and opened the back door of the middle car. Julian Thorne stepped out. He was 30 years old now, tall and lean, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my entire life's earnings. He had the sharp, angular face of his mother, but his eyes, warm, empathetic eyes, were entirely his own. He burst into the coffee shop, scanning the room frantically. When his eyes landed on me, sitting in the corner in my wrinkled pajamas and a dirty coat, his face crumpled. Elena! He didn't care about the onlookers. He didn't care about his suit. He ran across the room and fell to his knees in front of my chair, wrapping his arms around me in a crushing embrace. He buried his face in my neck, just as he used to when he was a frightened little boy. I'm so sorry, he sobbed, rocking me back and forth. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry. I held him, smelling the expensive cologne and the clean scent of success. It's okay, Julian. You're here now. He pulled back, holding my face in his hands. He looked at the dark circles under my eyes, the chapped lips. His expression hardened into something terrifying. Who did this? He asked. You have a daughter, Clara. Where is she? Why aren't you with her? I looked down at my hands. She didn't have room. It wasn't a good time. Julian stood up, pulling me gently to my feet. The energy radiating off him was nuclear. Not a good time, he repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. She left her mother on the street in February because it wasn't a good time. He turned to his head of security. Marcus, get her things from the car. Burn the car if you have to. I don't care. Elena is coming with us. Julian, I can't just leave my car. It's all I have. I protested weakly. No, Elena, he said, guiding me toward the door with a protective arm. It's not all you have. Not anymore. You have me. The interior of the SUV was like a spaceship. Soft, leather, silence, warmth. Julian sat beside me, holding my hand tight, refusing to let go even for a second. Driver, Julian said, his voice ice cold. Set a course for the address I just sent you. We have a stop to make before we go home. I looked at him. Where are we going? To Clara's house, Julian said. I want to meet the woman who decided my mother wasn't worth a guest room. Julian, please, I don't want a scene. There won't be a scene, Elena, he said, staring straight ahead. There will be a reckoning. We pulled up to Clara's house in the quiet, affluent suburb of Naperville. It was a large, pristine house with a manicured lawn, exactly the kind of life I had worked myself to the bone to provide for her. The sight of the 3 massive SUVs idling in her driveway caused curtains to twitch all along the street. Julian helped me out. I felt small and ashamed in my dirty clothes, standing in front of my daughter's beautiful home. But Julian held his head high, lending me his strength. He rang the doorbell. Greg answered. He was wearing a casual polo shirt, looking relaxed, holding a beer. His eyes widened when he saw Julian, recognizable instantly from the news, and then narrowed in confusion when he saw me. Elena? Greg asked. What is going on? Who is this? I am Julian Thorne, Julian said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried the weight of billions of dollars in absolute power. And I suggest you get your wife down here immediately. Greg stumbled back, intimidated. Clara! Clara, come here! Clara appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked annoyed, wiping her hands on a towel. Greg, what is the... She stopped. She saw me. She saw the SUVs. She saw Julian Thorne, the tech mogul she read about in magazines, standing on her porch with his hand on my shoulder. Mom? She whispered. Hello, Clara, Julian said smoothly. I don't believe we've formally met. I'm the rich kid your mother abandoned you for. Remember? Clara walked down the stairs, her face pale. I don't understand. What are you doing here? I came to collect the things Elena might have left here, Julian lied. But then I found out she didn't leave anything here because she was never let inside. He stepped into the foyer, forcing Greg to back up. You let a 68-year-old woman sleep in a Honda Civic in sub-zero temperatures, Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. A woman who wiped your nose, paid for your college, and sacrificed her own happiness to ensure you had this. He gestured around the house with disgust. This mediocre little kingdom. We didn't know it was that bad, Greg stammered. She's always exaggerating. She lost her home, Julian roared, the control finally slipping. Her building collapsed. And you were worried about your dinner party vibe? The neighbors were outside now, watching from their lawns. Phones were out, recording. Clara began to cry, tears of embarrassment and fear. You don't understand the dynamic, Julian. She was never a mother to me. She was always with you. She chose you. She didn't choose me, Julian said, his voice trembling with emotion. She chose survival. She chose to work 18-hour days so you wouldn't have to starve. She was the only mother I had because my own mother was too busy conquering the world. Elena gave me love because she had so much of it, but every single day she talked about you. Every single day. Clara would love this toy. Clara is starting school today. She missed you every second she was raising me. He looked at Clara with profound pity. You call her a parasite? Julian laughed, a harsh, sharp sound. My lawyers looked into your finances on the ride over, Greg, your leverage to the hilt, second mortgage. Credit card debt. You're drowning. And yet you look down on the woman whose hard labor paid the down payment on your first house? Greg turned purple. Clara sobbed into her hands. I'm taking her, Julian said. She will never need you again. She will never ask you for a dime. She will live in a comfort you can only dream of. But I want you to remember this moment. When you are old, and your children who are watching right now, by the way, are deciding what to do with you, pray they are kinder than you were. He turned to me. Ready to go home, Mom? The word hung in the air. Mom. I looked at Clara. I wanted to hug her, to fix it, to apologize for the years I missed. But looking at her now, I realized that I couldn't fix a broken heart by letting it trample me. Goodbye, Clara, I said softly. I hope you find your peace. We turned and walked out. We didn't look back. Julian didn't take me to a guest room. He took me to the penthouse of the Thorn Tower in downtown Chicago. It was a triplex of glass and light overlooking the lake. The east wing is yours, Julian said as we entered. It has its own kitchen, living room, garden terrace, and 2 bedrooms. It's bigger than my first house. Julian, this is too much, I said, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. It's not enough, he replied. I have a staff here, chef, housekeeping. They are here to serve you, not the other way around. You are never to lift a finger again, Elena. Do you hear me? You are retired. That night, I bathed in a tub made of marble. I slept in sheets that felt like woven clouds. But the luxury wasn't what healed me. It was the conversation we had over dinner. Julian sat across from me, eating simple pasta. I didn't just come for you because of duty, Elena. I came because I need you. You have the world. I have money, he corrected. I run a company with 10,000 employees. I make decisions that affect millions of lives, and I am surrounded by sharks. I need my moral compass. I need the woman who taught me that kindness is a strength, not a weakness. My mother, Evelyn. She died last year. I gasped. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Don't be. We weren't close. But she left me everything. And I realized I have all this power, and I don't know how to use it to actually help people. I need you to help me figure that out. And so, my new life began. It wasn't a life of idle luxury. Julian knew me too well. He knew I would wither if I wasn't useful. He appointed me the director of the Vance Initiative, a philanthropic branch of his company dedicated to supporting domestic workers and caregivers. You have a budget of $50 million to start, Julian told me. Go save the others. I threw myself into the work. We created pension funds for nannies who had been let go without severance. We created scholarship funds for the children of housekeepers. We built a legal team to defend caregivers from abusive employers. I wasn't just a figurehead. I was in the meetings. I was making decisions. For the first time in my life, my experience as a servant was treated as expertise, not a liability. Months passed. My health improved. The arthritis became manageable with top-tier medical care. I started dressing in elegant, soft suits. I cut my hair into a chic silver bob. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman of substance, not a discarded relic. Then came the gala. It was the launch of the foundation. The ballroom was filled with Chicago's elite. I stood backstage, my heart hammering against my ribs. Julian squeezed my hand. "Just speak from the heart," he whispered. I walked out to the podium. The lights were blinding. I saw the faces of the wealthy, the powerful, the people who usually looked through women like me as if we were glass. "My name is Elena Vance," I began, my voice trembling slightly before finding its rhythm. "For 40 years, I raised other people's children. I scrubbed other people's floors. I was the invisible infrastructure of their success." The room went silent. "We call domestic workers help, but that is the wrong word. We are the foundation. We allow doctors to save lives, CEOs to build empires, and artists to create, because we are there, holding the home together. And yet, when we age, when our backs break and our knees fail, we are often discarded like broken appliances." I looked out at the crowd. My own daughter called me a parasite when I lost my home. She didn't see a mother. She saw a burden. But I am standing here to tell you that caregiving is not a burden. It is the highest form of labor. And it is time we paid for it with dignity, not just minimum wage. The ovation was thunderous. People stood. Some wiped tears. Julian beamed from the front row, looking at me with a pride that healed 40 years of invisibility. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. The billionaire's nanny who became a philanthropist. From homeless to hero. And inevitably, the phone rang. It was Clara. "Mom?" Her voice was small, broken. "Hello, Clara." I saw the speech. I read the articles. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. Greg and we're separated." He blamed me for the backlash. "People recognize us in the street. It's been a nightmare." I listened, feeling a distant pang of sympathy, but no urge to fix it for her. "I miss you, Mom. Can we start over? The twins ask about you. I want you to come over. We can have dinner. I want to be a family again." I sat in my beautiful office, looking out at the city skyline. I thought about the cold nights in the Honda. I thought about the word parasite. "Clara," I said gently, "I forgive you. I truly do. Holding on to anger is poison, and I don't drink poison anymore. So you'll come?" Hope surged in her voice. "No," I said, "I won't." "What?" "But you said you forgive me." "I do. But forgiveness is not access. You showed me who you are when I was at my lowest. You showed me that your love is conditional. And I have learned, finally, that I deserve unconditional love." "But I'm your daughter." "Yes, and I will always love you. If you need money for the children, I will help. If you have a medical emergency, I will be there. But I will not sit at your table and pretend that you didn't leave me to freeze. We can have a relationship, Clara, but it will be a distant one. You have to earn your way back in. And it will take a long time." I heard her sobbing on the other end. "I'm so lonely, Mom." "I know," I said, my heart breaking but my resolve holding firm. "I was lonely for 30 years while I worked to give you a life. You are just feeling it for the first time. Sit with it. Learn from it." I hung up. A knock at the door. Julian walked in, holding a thick file folder. He looked nervous, which was rare for him. "Everything okay?" I asked. "I have one more piece of business," he said, sitting down. He slid the folder across the desk. I talked to my lawyers. And yours. I opened the folder. It was a petition for adult adoption. Julian? I looked up, tears springing to my eyes. I don't want to just be your friend, or your boss, or your honorary son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I want it on paper. I want to be Julian Vance Thorne. I want the legal right to take care of you when you get old. I want to be your son, Elena. Officially. I looked at the papers. It was a formality, really. He had been my son since the moment I cooled his fevered forehead when he was 4 years old. But symbols matter. What would Evelyn say? I asked, half joking. She would say it's the smartest merger I ever made, Julian smiled. I took the pen. My hand didn't tremble this time. I signed my name next to his. Yes, I said. Yes, my son. We hugged, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely secure. I realized then that family isn't just blood. Blood is a biological accident. Family is a choice. It is the people who show up when the building collapses. It is the people who pull you out of the wreckage and say, "You are not a burden. You are my home." I looked out the window at the vast, sprawling city of Chicago. Somewhere out there, Clara was learning the hard lessons of accountability. Somewhere out there, thousands of invisible women were waking up to the news that help was coming. And here, in the warmth of the life I had built, not with my DNA, but with my love, I finally put down the heavy weight of the past. I was Elena Vance. I was not a parasite. I was the root, and my tree was finally blooming.